This week, I am going all out and starting a brand new mini project. So to find out more about that, stay tuned. It's Ray and welcome to my little bookish corner of the world where I talk about everything I love about reading, about my favourite types of book and everything in between. This week I am starting a little project that is all about the wonder that is cozy mysteries. At least it is a wonder to me. I'm not going to sit here and say every single person must love them and here are my reasons why you must love them. But I am going to talk about why I enjoy them so much. So let's get to it. My love of cozy crime started when I was probably 10 years old and I went to buy a book for my dad. He was in hospital, unfortunately. He had leukemia. He was only 34. Actually, he was 33. He died when he was 34, but less of that. This is not a pity me party. Anyway, I went shopping with my grandmother and my brother and sister, both of whom are younger than me, and we went to a huge department store in Brighton because my grandparents lived there at the time. We went into every single department. My brother and sister bought him a white fluffy teddy bear, which I think my brother might still have somewhere in my mum's loft, and I saw a display of books, or I had done, in a shop that was a couple of doors down. And I thought, I really want to get a book. I was already a really big reader. I read everything and anything. And it had reached the point where many years beforehand that my mum had told my grandmother off repeatedly for leaving what she considered to be unsuitable material on her bedside table when I went over to stay. I would wander into her bedroom, find a book, it didn't matter what book, sit down on the edge of the bed and just read. And I read multitude of books that probably weren't suitable for, a 7-year-old, because it was when she was living much closer by before she got married to my grandfather. Well, my step-grandfather. And that's the thing though. I mean, my grandmother just didn't think she would have all these books. They weren't massively unsuitable. I'd say there were probably things like Georgette Heyer, and I think there were a couple of romances and things, but they weren't massively inappropriate. At least they were just books to me. It was a story. It was pages I could turn and read. And to be fair, my mum was worse. She would leave Stephen King and Dinar Kuntz and all manner of probably far more inappropriate texts on her own bedside table. And I think that's how she realised that she shouldn't do it, because I'd go upstairs to get something. Go upstairs, Rachel, and get this, that and the other, be ready for school or get ready to pack to go to Granny's house. And they'd find me there 15-20 minutes later with my head stuck in the latest Stephen King that had been on my mum's bedside table. But yeah, it's just one of those things. Anyway, back to the story. We had gone into this bookshop that was near to the big department store, and it was massive. It was Hannington's. I don't know if it's still there. I think that the building is still there, but I'm not sure if the shop still is. Anyway, they had a huge Christmas display every year, and we get taken over there in order to distract us from life in general, and also to give my mum time to do her Christmas shopping. And during that particular year, it was more so she could spend some time with my dad uninterrupted, because he was in hospital constantly. So my grandmother had the awful task of taking us shopping, and I'd seen this display of Agatha Christie books on a table in a window in a small bookshop near to Hannington's, which is quite close to the lanes. And I love the lanes. They have got it's a treasure trove. But I could get distracted by talking about that all day. I spent a lot of time when I was at university wandering around the secondhand bookshops there. And so we went back after my brother and sister had purchased this beautiful white fluffy teddy bear, which was probably only about, I don't know, a foot tall, maybe not even that. We went back into the bookshop and I purchased for my dad, which I haven't actually got the original copy. I have got my own version, which is called something different. It was called Halloween Party. They made it into a loose adaptation last year called A Haunting in Venice. The original book does not take place in Venice. Anyway, it also has far more grotesque. It has a couple of children's murders in it, but we don't need to go there either. I, for some reason, was absolutely fascinated with this cover, which had, I could imagine in my head years later, I imagined it as being a skull with an apple and a snake. But it turns out it's a skull with an apple skin wrapped around it on a black background. So I kind of remembered it, sort of. I don't know what happened to the book after my father passed away, but I know that he really enjoyed it. And it was at that point that I started getting interested in the genre of cozy mysteries. And I read my first Agatha Christie probably a year later, and I think it was I think it might have been Murder on the Orient Express, but I'm not gonna say quote me on it because I'm not quite sure. Yeah, I'm really not sure, but we are talking about something that happened nearly 40 years ago. Yes, I am that old. But anyway, that started my fascination with the genre, and it took a long time for me to realise that there were a multitude of authors. However, that multitude of authors didn't start becoming, not mainstream, because Agatha Christie was obviously, she's the queen of cozy, she's the queen of crime, but it was something that started building in popularity in probably the last decade. There have been a lot of other authors. I mean, I'm going to talk about one in particular in a moment, but there have been a lot of other authors. And of course, there are the cozy mystery TV shows. You've got things like Murder She Wrote, which is definitely inspired by by books like Agatha Christie. And then you've got Death in Paradise, you've got Midsummer Murders, you've got the Poirot TV series with David Suchet, you've got Miss Marple, but obviously that's again another adaptation from a Christie series. Then you have the more recent TV shows like Agatha Raisin, you have Hamish Macbeth from the early 90s, you have Mrs. Sidhu Investigates, which was a radio series before it became a TV series and then a book. You have so many, and you've got obviously you've then got the more recent things like, well, not recent, but you have Brokenwood mysteries, which I absolutely love. You've got My Life is Murder starring Lucy Lawless. And I could go on forever about all the TV series that you have that have gone on to make cozy mysteries far more mainstream and far more available to people who aren't necessarily massive fans of books. You've also got Anthony Horowitz, who wrote the Magpie Murders and Moonflower Murders, which has become a miniseries. And then you've got the author, the creator of Death in Paradise, Beyond Paradise, and Return to Paradise, which is the Australian TV series, which comes out, I believe, later this year. But you've got all of those. Robert Thorogood, who created those, also wrote a series called The Marlowe Murder Club, which came out around the same time as The Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osman. Then you have I could go on forever about the TV adaptations, the film adaptations, and everything else. I mean, Agatha Christie has been having film adaptations, and then of course there was The Mousetrap, which is the longest running show on the West End stage for decades. I mean, that's been running for a very, very long time, 70 years, I believe. And you've got all of those things that go towards making cozy mysteries even more popular. A lot of this stuff has been going on long before I found the books. But I'm going to talk about a few of my favourites and a few that just didn't quite make it for me as an introduction to a mini-series I will be doing all about TV adaptations of my favourite cozy mysteries, and comparing and contrasting those two things, the adaptation of the book and the adaptation that turns up on screen, which is going to be fun because I'm going to be revisiting some of the earlier shows that I haven't seen in a while, as well as the 1970s Agatha Christie films, which I have to be honest, I prefer to the 2020 adaptations by let's not talk about the 2020 adaptations of the Agatha Christie's Murder on the Orient Express and Death on the Nile, because I might depress myself. Anyway, first one I'm going to talk about actually is going to be one of the latest ones, which is Mrs. Sidhu's Dead and Scone by Suk Panu. Suk Panu actually is the creator of the Mrs. Sidhu Investigates series, both on the radio plays, which is where it started, I believe, back in 2017, and the TV show, which aired last year on UK TV Play in the UK, as well as, I believe, it was BritBox. This is the first book in the series. I am hoping there is another one. I don't think it mentions there being another one at the moment. However, Mrs. Sidhu is an acquired taste. She is enchanting. I find her highly amusing. And I do think that he created someone in her that was incredibly relatable. She is quite calm, I wouldn't say she's sensible. She is impulsive at the same time as being calm. She has a lot to contend with. Her father was a police officer who died on the job. Her husband died suddenly of a heart attack, and she is left with a considerable amount of debt that she wasn't aware her husband had incurred, which means that she has to take on jobs that she wouldn't necessarily take on at any other point in her life. She is a very skilled Indian cook. She loves cooking the food that her parents brought over from India, and she herself came over from India and adapted to a way of life in Slough, which is where she lives. And she is offered, in this book, she is offered a job at a health club, and then things start going wrong. One of the therapists is murdered, and the title of the book, Dead and Scone, is purely because the woman is murdered while she has a batch of scones in the oven, and that is what they're discovered, and it is what makes everything click for her. You know that look that J.B. Fletcher gets when she suddenly has this epiphany. And I'm saying this because I went to a show last week, which is why there was no episode. I went to a show last week in Brighton at the Commedia of Solve Along a Murder, She Wrote. And it was highlighted in that show that there is this moment, the epiphany moment, where J.B. Fletcher suddenly realises exactly what was missing in why she couldn't solve the case, and it clicks for her, and all of a sudden everything is clear. But she also has this specific expression on her face as if to say, I know what happened, I can solve the crime. And that's pretty much what happens with Mrs. Sidhu when she realises what has happened, when she suddenly clicks, hang on a second, this was in there, but that wasn't on there. And she's talking about the jam that was cooking on the hob. Somebody took the jam off the hob, and they didn't take the scones out of the oven. And it's at that moment that she realizes where everything meets up. But as with pretty much every amateur sleuth that exists in book world, she does put herself in some danger, and she is not the best friend of the police officer she has to work with, or rather who finds themselves working with her and is massively reluctant about it. But I do enjoy this kind of book. I love when they are incredibly amateur, they haven't got any experience, and they are just flying by the seat of their pants. I really enjoy that, and I think that's what made Mrs. Sidhu great. And the TV series is highly amusing. It really is incredibly fun, and it was quite sad it was only 4 episodes, and they were an hour and a half long. So if you get the chance, definitely watch that. But I'd also say read this. A friend of mine pointed out that she found it was a little bit messy, and there were certain things she wasn't happy with. And then she said, but this was his first book, and it is his first book. However, he does have a lot of experience in writing this character. And I think one of the things that you have to take away from this particular novel from Dead and Scone is the fact that you are reading about a character that you are expected to already be familiar with, even though this is the first book. And that is something, as someone who has watched the show and listened to the radio plays, I am familiar with her, but I can appreciate that some people might find it a little bit startling at first. So I would say watch the TV show, listen to the radio plays. They are available on BBC iPlayer, and you can, I believe, buy them on Audible as well. This is not an advert, but you can also purchase them on Audible if you can't get hold of BBC iPlayer. However, they are both available there. And then stick your nose into this book and don't come out of it. It took me probably an afternoon, and I really enjoyed it. But that is Mrs. Sidhu. I'm going back to the original now, and that is The Mysterious Affair at Styles by Agatha Christie. This is the first ever Poirot novel, and I read this at the beginning of the year as part of the Agatha Christie read-along over on Instagram. We're now on month 6, and I'm actually caught up because I read month 5 in April. Anyway, this is Poirot's first murder investigation, and he doesn't feel like as much of a main character or as larger than life and grandiose as he does in books like Evil Under the Sun, which is obviously one of the later novels and probably my favourite film adaptation, but that's for a later discussion. And this is more focusing on Captain Hastings, who is his regular companion, and calling Hercule Poirot in to help with the investigation because he has retired. And he's also, he's a former detective and a Belgian refugee, and it's after the First World War. It wasn't my favourite Agatha Christie, and it wasn't my favourite Poirot, and Poirot is my favourite creation by her. But it was a good one, and it did keep me guessing. There were a few twists and turns and the red herrings that Christie is very well known for. I don't remember watching the David Suchet version of this, and I think that's the only televised version there has been. But I am going to refresh myself because I think it's going to be an interesting one, and it probably is a very early one as well, because obviously there were a number of episodes and they covered all of the Hercule Poirot mysteries that Christie wrote. So I will definitely be refreshing my mind on that one. And yeah, but that's The Mysterious Affair at Styles, and it's probably a really good place to start if you want to find out more about Poirot. But if you want my favourite Poirot is either Murder at Mesopotamia or Evil Under the Sun, both of which I don't think are massively obscure. Hickory Dickory Dock isn't bad either, and I've still got quite a few of his to read. In fact, almost all of the 12 months of this year that are the Agatha months, almost all of them are Hercule Poirot, barring, I think, Sparkling Cyanide and partners in crime. I think they're the only two at this moment in time that I've got on my shelf that aren't Hercule Poirot. The next one is probably the character who reintroduced me to cozy mystery after a considerable period of time, and also the one that made me search out even more cozy mystery TV shows on television after. Yeah, actually, they probably are. And that is MC Beaton's Agatha Raisin. This is Quiche of Death, which is the first book. Introduces us to Agatha in all her rather vicious glory. She is quite a... I wouldn't say she was not anxiety. She's definitely a very confident woman, but she does have her anxieties, mostly around the fact that she's getting older. This is probably my favourite book in this series because while there are 35 books now, I believe, yes, and the most recent one's called Dead on Target, while there are 35, sadly MC Beaton passed away in 2019 and she was working with another author called R.W. Green, who has taken over responsibility for writing both Beaton's Agatha Raisin and her Hamish Macbeth series. I have a few of those on my shelf as well. Agatha Raisin, for some reason, seems to have, I wouldn't say deteriorated, but I would say that the quality of the novels have, over time, made me more frustrated with the character. That said, this is, it says quite clearly here, as seen on Sky 1 HD. So that shows this is quite an old copy of the book. I think this is actually, I don't even know. I think I got this second hand because I originally read it on Kindle all the way back in about 2014. Anyway, Agatha Raisin is an ex-PR expert from London. She moves to a small village called Carsley in the Cotswolds, and she makes her home there. Initially, obviously, everybody's kind of like, woman from the big city. But they slowly warm to her. She tries to ingratiate herself in the village. She falls in love with her next door neighbour, James. She makes friends with the man of the manor, Charles, who I think is absolutely perfect for her, but we won't go into my Charles and Agatha forever cycle right now. And she does make a few friends, including the wife of the vicar and Mrs. Bloxley. It's been a while since I've read this. And she, in her first adventure, which actually is what gets her into solving crimes in the first place, she makes a quiche in a baking competition, which doesn't win. However, the judge of said baking competition takes her spinach quiche home, eats it, and dies. And Agatha is accused of murdering the judge. However, it turns out that Agatha had cheated in making her quiche. She hadn't made it at all. She'd purchased it. It causes a lot of problems for the business that she purchased the quiche from. And she realises that she needs to not only prove her innocence, because she was very frustrated at the fact she didn't win, but she also then has to prove who did it for her own sake and her own sense of self. And that is how she starts her career as a sleuth. It's a Queen of the Village mystery, and that's how the whole series is titled. They're Queen of the Village. They're not always Agatha Raisin and or anything like that. There's quite a few that are just titled things like Hot to Trot, Dead on Target. I'm now going to quickly look. Hiss and Hers, Pushing Up Daisies. They've still got the Agatha Raisin subtitle, but that is not the title of the book. Anyway, these are fun. I would say that the earlier books in the series are far better. I did reach a point where I started thinking that MC Beaton didn't like women, and that's my personal observation. I know that a lot of people feel differently, and I am one of those fans of the books who does like Ashley Jensen as Agatha Raisin. I think that we have got this in a picture in our head. Everything has to be exactly as it is in the book. And I think that if things had been exactly as they are in the book, they would be far too straightforward. There would be a lot more bitterness in Agatha's character, which does exist in the books and doesn't so much exist on the screen. And she wouldn't have built these such lovely bonds with the people that she's in the village with. Yes, they have taken creative license when it comes to certain character names, certain character ages. And while it may not look that way, Ashley Jensen is pretty much a similar age to the age that we have for Agatha Raisin. She's in her early 50s. And that's another thing. It does seem like Agatha never ages, because her books have been going on for a number of years. And Agatha is still in her 50s, as she was when the series started. So either divorces happen incredibly quickly because she marries James and they are separated, or there's some kind of time loop that I need to find for myself before I get too much older. Anyway, that's Agatha Raisin, and I do like her. I think that, as I said, the TV series for me is a different type of escapism, and it is something that I found I really started to enjoy far more when I was able to sit down and just watch them without thinking about anything else and not comparing them to the books. And I do think that the later books kind of lack something, but again, that's personal view. Next one is a brand new. This is The Antique Hunter's Guide to Murder by C.L. Miller. C.L. Miller is actually the daughter of an antiques roadshow expert, and this is based in the antique world. Now, this is just to prove that there are new authors coming out all the time. I mean, we do have a lot of celebrity authors, and I have to say I'm going to be talking about one that I picked up mistakenly thinking it was a cozy mystery because of the way it had been marketed, and also because of the cover, strangely enough. But I do think that it's worth picking up new authors occasionally, and I did enjoy this book. It is, there's a few twists and turns, there's an element of glamour, and there's also a locked room mystery, which is definitely fun. Who doesn't like a locked room mystery? I mean, I'm forced to think of multiple ones that I enjoy in Agatha Christie books. Next book is the third in a series, and I've already mentioned Robert Thorogood and his Marlowe Murder Club, which many people initially were accusing of being a huge rip-off of the Thursday Murder Club. But I have to be honest, I don't think that they're that similar, and I can't judge on further books because I haven't read anything of Richard Osman's past the first book, which I unhauled by giving it to a friend, and I just didn't want to go back into that world again. Anyway, this is the third book in the Marlowe Murder Club series, The Queen of Poisons. And look at that. This is the limited edition indie bookstore edition. Absolutely love it. And it's even textured, but that's irrelevant. Judith, Bex and Suze, I love them. I think that they have shown incredible growth over the 3 books that have come out, which are The Marlowe Murder Club, Murder Comes to Marlowe, and The Queen of Poisons. In this case, The Queen of Poisons actually refers to the poison, which is, I'm now going to completely forget, it's aconite. Obviously, I believe that's foxglove. Anyway, he is murdered with aconite, and it is the Marlowe Murder Club. Being Marlowe, being Bex, Judith and Suze, take it upon themselves, though Bex is somewhat reluctant, to figure out who did it and why. And it sends them along a meandering journey. And I have to be honest, I didn't guess who did it. And that is very rare for me. Quite often I'll start reading a book and I'll go, oh, it was them. They did it. I did not get this. I got to the last few pages where the revelation was coming out, and it was like, all the clues were there if you saw them for what they were, but I didn't get it. I'm not going to go into who it was or why they did it. I'm just going to say it was a very clever one. And this has recently been made into a TV series. They've made the first book, and the second book is actually being made, I believe, later this year, with Samantha Bond in the role of Judith. I don't think she's quite old enough realistically, but I suppose that they didn't want to make her a woman in her mid-70s. They could have got Judi Dench or someone to do it. But anyhow, but I believe she's going to be in the Thursday Murder Club, or is that Helen Mirren? So I enjoyed this, I would say definitely pick up the first one first, and don't be misled by the reviews that say, oh, this is a rip-off of the Thursday Murder Club, because it isn't. It is, honestly, they are chalk and cheese. And I'm not saying that because I didn't enjoy the Thursday Murder Club. I'm saying it because I don't think they are at all similar. I have spoken with friends who didn't enjoy the first book and aren't going to bother with the others, but that's their choice. And this is me talking about books I enjoyed, and I did enjoy this one. Now we're going to talk about the book that misled me. And I will be talking about this one a little bit further because it was a book that I picked up just last week. I purchased it a while ago. It had been sitting on my shelf for probably a month, and I feel so misled. And that was The Trial by Rob Rinder. I know it sounds weird, but the way that the cover was laid out, I thought, oh, it's a cozy mystery. Even the back of the book kind of makes it sound like it could be a cozy mystery. It is not a cozy mystery. And that is not the reason I DNF'd it and immediately shoved it on my unhaul shelf along with several books from last month. I put this on the unhaul shelf because I didn't want to finish it. It was a slog. Now, I do think that this is unfair. The author is obviously well respected. He has got another book out at the moment and it's doing very well. I believe it's called The Suspect. But for me, I felt misled into it just because it didn't quite fit what I thought it was going to be. So that's on me, really. But I do think that, I mean, as you can see, the covers, this doesn't look like a thriller. This doesn't look like a crime thriller. This looks like it is going to be more light-hearted. It's not going to be full of facts being thrown at you left, right and centre. And that's really what it was. So I don't know how to say it. I think it is more to do with the fact that it could have been so much more, and I think it would have been quite an interesting cozy mystery rather than a crime thriller. I'm not sure. I suppose because crime thrillers are not my thing, they are so far out of my wheelhouse. I feel uncomfortable even talking about them because I don't know enough about them. I've read a few and they just aren't for me. So what did you think of Rob Rinder's The Trial? Let me know in the comments if you think that I'm being fair in saying because it wasn't what I expected it to be, I've DNF'd it. And I don't DNF very often. Anybody will tell you I slog through books that really have... I've reached a point 100 pages in where I've gone, I'm not doing this. I'm really not doing this. And then I still read them. And in this case, I got to page 200 and went, no, I can't do this anymore. So that is my second DNF, well, my first DNF of 2 in 1 month, which is so unlike me. But what do you think of the others? Have you read any of them? Are there any cozy mystery authors you think I'm missing out on? I'd love to find out. So post your comments down below and tell me of all those wonderful cozy mystery that you think that I would absolutely love. I mean, I love cozy fantasy as well, but cozy mysteries are a thing that I'm always looking for new authors. I also have Rosemary Schrager's latest is on my TBR, mostly because it hasn't come out in paperback yet. I believe that comes out in November. I also have the latest in the Dial A for Auntie series by Jessie Satantu on order. It should be arriving at some point this week. Then there are... there's The Accidental Medium by Tracy Whitwell. I loved those 2 books in that series. And as you can see, it's this shelf right here. I have quite a few, and there are a few more that have kind of hit my radar that I'm thinking about purchasing when I finish the ones I haven't yet read. But I would love to hear from you, so please leave any comments and don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and I will speak with you again soon. Bye.